We're going to speak with Linda Chavez, former Labor Secretary nominee under George W. Bush, the chairman of the Center for Equal Opportunity, in just a minute. But I wanted to just remind people how we got here, whether it's the controversy over the wall, whether it's the controversy over Trump's executive order on immigration, the 7 countries, the 90 and 120-day temporary bans, how we got here. And the way to understand how we got here is to understand what presidents and Congresses and the federal government have been promising the American people for generations and haven't delivered. That's how we got here to have a President Trump. And that's how we got here with policies that at one point in time would have been seen, I think, as generally commonsensical. And yet because of how far left the left has lurched, you have hysteria in the streets.
And it's because people don't trust Donald Trump.
Well, okay. Well, that may be on the unhinged left. But let's remember who the woman they wanted to be president of the United States, what she and her husband were saying when he was president of the United States in 1995, for example, President Bill Clinton in his State of the Union address in 95.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace, as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan.
I mean, that litany of things President Clinton said in 95, distinguish that from things that Trump has said.
Well, not in 2011. President Obama had a temporary immigration order and a ban against Iraqis coming to the U.S.
6 months, right? But yeah. I mean, what President Clinton said in that State of the Union speech, that would be decried by those 500,000 women marchers a couple of weekends ago as racist and xenophobic and misogynist, and Kerr would have a lawsuit and a press conference. I mean, that was a Democrat president saying not much different than what Donald Trump is saying today. And the reason that it continues to have currency today is because what President Clinton and so many presidents before and after him, Republicans and Democrats and members of Congress have said didn't come to pass. Now fast forward to 2015, July of 2015. This exchange, which I think is one of the seminal exchanges of the last couple of years on this issue between Texas Senator Ted Cruz and then ICE Director Sarah Saldana, who he knew because she was from Texas. Listen to this, on sanctuary cities.
You said then it would be helpful, as in presumably helpful is good, is beneficial, is something you support. So are you saying then that ICE supports making it mandatory to comply with federal detainers?
No.
So it's helpful, but you don't support it.
Right? So that's sanctuary cities. Now, Ms. Saldana explaining what ICE does and doesn't do, particularly as it pertains to violent criminals who are non-citizens.
I want the American people to understand our job and our mission, if I may. We don't release people willy-nilly. We release people pursuant to these statutes and regulations.
Right. Okay. That's the rhetorical position that every ICE director and every administration has taken. And then there's the actual data. And Ted Cruz presented her with the data.
Ms. Saldana, I want to note that your testimony here, when I ask you how many criminals ICE released in 2013, you were off by a factor of 3. You said 30,000. The correct answer is 104,000. There were 68,000 criminals, criminal illegal aliens, that ICE declined to begin deportation proceedings against, despite the fact, as Senator Sessions observed, the federal law that you're holding up there says they shall be deported. The Obama administration refused to deport them. That's 68,000. In addition to that, there were 36,000 in deportation proceedings with criminal convictions that the Obama administration released. And I would note that among those were 193 murderers with homicide convictions, were 426 people with sexual assault convictions, were over 16,000 criminal illegal aliens with drunk driving convictions released by this administration because this administration refuses to follow the law.
That's how we're here. That's how we're here. What it was been said by the political class for generations and what's actually been done. And for more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Linda Chavez, chairman of the Center for Equal Opportunity, former Reagan administration official and nominee for labor secretary under the George W. Bush administration. Ms. Chavez, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's great to be with you.
So what's your take? Where do you come down in the hysteria and the kind of need for cooler heads to prevail with respect to, pick domestic immigration-related issues or the refugee travel visa issue that has dominated the headlines over the last 72 hours?
Well, I'm not happy with the executive order. I think it was rash, and I think it had not been thought out, had not been properly vetted, and so I think the president has made a big mistake on the executive order. But let me talk for a minute about the Bill Clinton and illegal immigration. I think probably a lot of your listeners don't realize that at the time that Bill Clinton made that speech, we were apprehending 1.5 million people at the border trying to get into the United States. Today, that number has dropped to what is about a 40-year low. It's about between 300,000 and 400,000 at last count that we were apprehending at the border trying to get in. There were huge numbers of illegal immigrants trying to come into the United States in the mid-1990s, and in fact, the greatest period of illegal immigration in modern history was between 1995 and 2000. What's remarkable to me about what I consider the hysteria today about illegal immigration is that we have made huge progress. We have, many more people at the border. We do have fencing that exists in the most heavily traveled parts of the border. And one of our problems now, in terms of the reason we have so many people in the United States who are here illegally, is that our border protection has gotten so good that what used to be a kind of migratory pattern where people would come to work in the United States and then go back home, particularly when there were recessions or slowdowns, is a lot of people end up staying here who would have been migratory in the past because it's so much more difficult to get through. So I think there is broad hysteria about illegal immigration, that illegal immigration is frankly one of the easiest national problems that we have to be solved. It requires changing our legal immigration laws to make it easier for people whose skills we need and lack in the United States to come here legally. We could make our system more market-based, more cognizant of the fact that we need both low-skilled and high-skilled workers, and give people a chance to come here either as temporary workers or on a permanent basis and do it legally, and we would essentially solve our illegal immigration problem.
Linda, you mentioned that Trump's temporary travel ban bothers you. What doesn't sit well with you?
Well, I don't look. The 1965 immigration law says that you cannot, that the federal government cannot discriminate on the basis of national origin, and that was because our previous immigration system was entirely based on quotas for certain countries, and so we are now not supposed to make distinctions in our policy based on countries of origin. And there was a reference to the Obama administration and what it did with respect to Iraq. It did not put a ban on people coming from Iraq. What it did is put extra scrutiny on those people who held Iraqi passports when they applied for visas and when they were to come to the United States. So I think what President Trump has done is possibly a violation of the Constitution if, in fact, it's interpreted as a religious test. And I think it is, on its face, not in conformity with the 1965 Immigration Act. And
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of legal scholars have weighed in on this, and the national security override of the 65 Act. Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, has written on this topic, as have Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington, who disagrees with the executive order, has essentially suggested the same thing. So, I mean, the legality of the order notwithstanding, I don't
well,
want
you're
okay.
right.
Go ahead.
The president does have authority if there's a national security interest, but you have to remember that the refugees that we're talking about have, in fact, been thoroughly vetted. Most of them have been in the process of coming to the United States for about 2 years. They've had all of their documents verified. There have been searches of criminal databases in all countries. They've had biometric data gathered. They've got fingerprints, eye scans, all manner of information gathered on them. I mean, my husband, under President Bush, the first, was the head of Office of Refugee Resettlement. Mm-hmm. This is not like applying for a tourist visa to come to the country. There is a very, very long, arduous, and thorough vetting process already in place, and these people have been approved to come to the United States. So, yes, national security can override, but you have to be able to show that these people posed a national security threat, and I don't think they'll be able to do that in court.
Well, okay, we'll see how that plays out. I want to get back to something else you said, though, about illegal immigration and the strides that we've made, and people that would be migratory go back and forth, and they can't now because of the enhanced border security over the last 20 years. That may be true in part, but as you heard the exchange between Ted Cruz and Sarah Saldana from just a year and a half ago. We still have this problem of the rhetoric that says we're going to deport convicted criminals, violent criminals who are here illegally, and everybody agrees, and the numbers suggest that's not happening. And it's very difficult to move in the direction that I agree we should move, like guest worker program, as you referenced, for example. If the federal government is unable to abide its primary responsibility of security and do something that everybody across the partisan divide agrees should be done, which is ejecting convicted violent criminals who are non-citizens. And the data suggests that we're not doing a particularly good job at that.
Well, I think we did deport. I don't have the numbers in front of me because I'm not in my office, but I absolutely agree that somebody who has been convicted of a crime of violence in the United States and who is here illegally ought to serve out their sentence and then ought to be deported. I don't think that is frankly up for debate. And interestingly, you're in Chicago, and I don't know what your mayor is going to do, but Bill de Blasio, who's hardly a right-winger, has now handed a list of the deportable crimes that, even though his is a sanctuary city, they are going to cooperate on. And I don't see that this should be controversial. If you've obviously committed a homicide, if you've robbed a bank with a gun, if you've been involved in an aggravated assault, there are all sorts of crimes of physical violence that I think everyone ought to be able to agree. If you've committed those crimes and you're in the country illegally, you don't just get released from jail and get to go back to your life. You need to be deported. So I actually think there is the ability to come together on that issue, and I would hope that we will find a way out on that particular problem.
All right. She is Linda Chavez, chairman of the Center for Equal Opportunity, former Reagan administration official nominee for labor secretary under the George W. Bush administration as well. Ms. Chavez, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.